Check in, family. Grand Rising. Joyous Rising. Check in, family. Come on in.
Dr. Kia preached, shining wisdom's light, teaching soul tribe how to see through the night. Ancient scriptures and bloodlines she knows, spreading truth wherever she goes. Soul tribe rising, hear her call, raising vibrations for one and all. Dr. Kia shows the way to a brighter, freer day. Through her channel, knowledge flows, breaking chains that hold us close, teaching paths to abundance and wealth, guiding others to free themselves. Soul tribe rising, hear her call, raising vibrations for one and all. Dr. Kia shows the way to a brighter, freer day. From currencies to investments divine, she's helping her tribe to realign with wisdom, ancient and new, showing what we all can do. Soul tribe rising, hear her call, raising vibrations for one and all. Dr. Kia shows the way to a brighter, freer day. Soul tribe rising, hear a call, raising vibrations for one and all. Dr. Kia lights the way to a new and brighter day.
Check in, family. I see you coming in from all over the world. Welcome, Soul. Oh, everybody, it's so good to see you. I tried to put everybody's comments up so far that entered the room. I'm so happy to see everybody. It is Wednesday. This is December the 10th, 2025, and the time is 2:35 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Supreme Rising, everybody. Glorious Rising. Make sure as you come into the chat, you hit the like button. And also tell everybody who you are, where you're hailing from. I see some of you saying it's snowing in Canada. It's snowing in other parts of America as well. Here in Jacksonville, Florida, it's about 61 degrees Fahrenheit, but we did have a cold front. And this weekend, I went to Tennessee, also known as Egypt, as we all have come to realize. And if you've been following me for some time and you've seen in my community area or the post section of my YouTube channel how I put up the ancient biblical map, it shows that Egypt is in America. Babylon, Jerusalem, Morocco, many, many places, Lebanon, a lot of the places about which the Bible speaks are actually located here in America, which is known as Northwest Africa, Turtle Island, and other names as well. So we're going to get into that just a little bit, but I was in Tennessee this weekend and I got to meet up with Jacob Bay, the sheik and a researcher or resident researcher here of the Dr. Kia Pruitt Show, who's been uncovering a lot of decoded things or a lot of coded things to help us see what's really going on in the world. So we got to meet up and see some things that's going on in Egypt or Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee. He and my son and I did a little bit of business and some exploring as well. And we saw how places that were typically cold in many of the buildings downtown at the courthouse, etc., downtown buildings that look so callous and cold and just stony and brown and gray are now being revitalized. They're putting up plants and gardens and flowers and trees because this is just an indication of what is to come as we are waking up to the fact that this used to be a planet that was tropical, beautiful, and very, very prosperous. And not just this planet, but this place here in America known as America or Turtle Island, however you want to see it. So let's get into our topic for today. Before we do, family, I just want to welcome you and thank you so much for always being very, very kind to me here on the Dr. Kia Pruitt Show. I also want to thank all of our new members who joined the Silver Soul Tribe group. We're going to talk this Saturday about a sleeper currency that only a few people are talking about, and we're going to ask ourselves if we should invest in that currency. So if you are interested, nobody has to feel pressured and just doing a little deep dive into certain investments as we do what the Bible says, as we acquire resources for our inheritance, because the Bible says that a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. So if you are interested in joining our private membership group, then please feel free to do so. I will put that link in the description section for you and here in the chat. So feel free to do that at your own time. We're also going to talk about later on how silver is really, really important and how there is a case for silver. So I see somebody here from Duval in Jacksonville, Florida. Hello, Sister Trina. It's so good to see you. Often when I'm out and about, I run into people who know me and who recognize me from the Silver Soul Tribe group or from the Dr. Kia Pruitt Show, and that's awesome. So hello, thank you all for telling me that I'm gorgeous. I appreciate it, or that you're excited, that you're always excited when you see that my notification comes up. So let's get into some of the information that I've uncovered that's going on here in the world, but specifically in America. Here is the link to the Silver Soul Tribe group, the private membership group. So if you want to dive into investments, you can go and click on that link. But I often talk about things as it relates to the global currency reset, the revaluation of currencies, and give you the financial forecast here on my main channel. We just dive deeper in the membership group. So you see the button there, how to join. Grand Rising, family. For centuries, people have had discussions with their elders as they try to discover who they are. For centuries, we've been having discussions and powwows with tribal leaders and elders from all over the world. Everybody all over the world wants to know, from whence do I come? So it's very typical to have a family tree or discussions with your family members to discover your ancestry. Why? Because a person who doesn't know his or her origins is like a tree without roots. A person who doesn't know from whence they came is like a tree without roots. How can you be nourished? How can you flourish and grow if you don't know from whence you've come? So we used to have these family reunions, whether you come from European nations, Asiatic nations, you come from America, you come from certain tribes and indigenous tribes, it doesn't matter. You come from African nations and tribes in Africa. No matter where you come from, it is something deep within us that wants us to know, where do I come from? So for centuries, we've had discussions with family members to discuss our ancestry and our origins. Most recently, though, over the last few decades, we've consulted with medical professionals and we've taken DNA tests to discover from whence do I come? What is in my bloodline? There used to be a time here in America that you couldn't even get married without taking a blood test to make sure that the person you were entering into covenant with was compatible with your bloodline. Because if your bloodlines were not compatible with one another, you could have certain problems, certain diseases would arise. For example, in the so-called Black community, if you have sickle cell anemia, you have to be careful who you marry, because if you marry another person with sickle cell anemia, your child can be very, very sickly. And while that's okay, if you want to take on, the medical issues and you love all your children, all the things that come with it, fine. However, you have to be careful and be proactive, not only in financial matters, but in ancestral matters as well. So if you are sickle cell, you have the sickle cell anemia, they would tell you, now you got to be careful if you have somebody who has full-blown sickle cell anemia, or even if they have the trait, they have sickle cell trait, then you have to be careful if you're anemic, because then you have blood problems and blood diseases that can cost you down the line. People used to be very, very meticulous and very serious about whom they married or aligned with and made babies with. So that's just in a Black community, because sickle cell is a disease that plagues African American, Black Americans who are indigenous peoples here in America. But there are other diseases that plague different groups. And so they would take blood tests, or they would consult with the elders to see if they were compatible, because you want to make sure that the person that you marry not only has the blood compatibility as you, but they have the same ideologies, the same philosophies, because in that way, you're more likely to last as a marriage, and you're more likely to stay together to raise the children, and your children are more likely to be healthy. That's what used to happen in previous years. Even I was born in 1968. I remember people still taking blood tests. We took a blood test, my husband and I, when I got married at 18, but at that time, it wasn't something that you had to do. It wasn't mandatory like it had been in previous years. Family, welcome Sister Sandy, our new private group member. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining up with the Silver Soul Tribe. Keep checking in, family. So whereas before we would consult with our elders, and we would have tribal meetings, and we would have reunions, and we would look over our family tree, most recently, people would take DNA tests to see who they're related to and from whence they came. But what if I told you that there was a recent study that exposed critical security flaws in widely DNA tests used all across the globe? Critical security flaws in widely used DNA sequencing technology. This isn't just about African Americans, Europeans, people from Australia. These people who control everything, they control the financial system, they control education, they control hospitals, they control research, they control politics, they control governments. These so-called elites that are related to the Elohim or the fallen angels, which is why they call themselves elites or elites, these human hybrids and non-human reptilians, draconians, whatever, they also control research labs and DNA frequencies, DNA tests. So recently there was a study that came out that said portable genetic sequences used around the globe to sequence DNA have critical, previously unreported security vulnerabilities. That means that when they look at these sequences of the DNA test, they saw that there were flaws that revealed altered genetic information. So they can lie to you and say you came from this bloodline, and you came from this nation, you came from this tribe, no matter where you came from. So this genetic information went without detection, according to a new study. But now we've entered the golden age where the crown chakra is being activated. Corona, that's what the 2020 year 2020 was about. It wasn't just about the COVID that shut down the world, but they called it the coronavirus because corona means crown, Corona, as in their crown chakra is being activated. They're leaving the Piscean age, the age where they just trusted everything. They trusted religion. They trusted the Bible. They trusted hearsay. They trusted the elites that were in control. They trusted education system. They trusted medicine and research, all of that. Now people are waking up. They've ended the Piscean age and we're now into the golden age. Corona as in crown, as in gold. And we've also entered the age of Aquarius. So people are waking up. This is why they unleashed that sickness called COVID, because they tried to have another human reset, another planetary reset. We're on reset number 7, where the Anunnaki or whatever these fallen angels, these beings that came here to enslave the planet, had whatever they do resets to unalive as many humans as they can, and then the ones that remain, they enslave them. Now, during other resets, you have to read the books like Terra Infinita and that whole series of books. During the other resets, humans died, they were unalive, and the ones that remained had the help of the giants to escape beyond this dome and escape beyond many ice walls to go to other planes. So Mars, all these constellations and things they say in the sky, really, according to Terra Infinita and some other researchers, Nos Confundum is another YouTube channel that talks about this. These humans that remain went to some places, other land masses beyond this dome. They went beyond the ice walls. There's another book called Beyond the Ice Walls. Many of them, again, had the help of giants that were here before some of the humans. And the giants also are human beings that made it with some of the fallen angels. Remember, the scripture says that the sons of God made it with the daughters of men, the sons of God, the other beings, the sons of the Elohim, the extraterrestrial beings, made it with the daughters of mankind, and they created giants. They also call them the Nephilim. Some of them helped humans escape the wars that were here when the Anunnaki and the people that they call the Watchers, some of them are called Watchers, and you have other custodians and other reptilian, draconian, all different type of beings that are here on this earth plane right now that have caused many, many resets to completely unalive as many of us as they can. Well, many of us escaped and moved beyond the ice walls to other places. One of those places is called the Ancestral Republic. And so some of those people that have escaped and moved to the Ancestral Republic have recently come back because they are the ancestors of a lot of us that are here on the earth plane. They survived. They've come back, many of them, to help us awaken, to help the crown chakra be activated. They've written the books. And they have a whole library in the Ancestral Republic talking about all the different resets that we've had here in America and all across the globe, and how we've been enslaved and how many of them have tried time and time again to come and save us. Well, you have a group of them here now. Okay. They're helping us to awaken to the fact that they lied to us even about our DNA. Now, this is about everybody. Researchers from the University of Florida have for the first time exposed these security risks and devices from Oxford Nanopore Technologies, which produce nearly all the portable genetic sequencers in the world. Altered by the security researchers, Oxford Nanopore Technologies has rolled out updated software to patch the vulnerabilities, but out-of-date software or unsecured internet systems could still leave some DNA sequences vulnerable to attack. No one in the world had looked at the security of these devices, which shocked me, said Christina Boucher, PhD, a professor of computer and information science and engineering at UF, University of Florida. She's an expert in bioinformatics and co-author of the new report. So they go on to talk about how nobody had looked into how these type of DNA sequences and results have been either tampered with or they're just untrue. Remember I said a person who doesn't know his or her origins is like a tree without roots. This is the reason why so many of us are confused, unhappy, don't know what foods to eat, because we don't even know what matches with our blood type. We don't even know what's in alignment with our DNA, because a lot of our stories, no matter where you are from all over the world, have been altered. So if you're a tree without its roots, what are you supposed to do? How do you know to eat? How do you know how to cure yourself or heal yourself? Some people can eat meat and be okay. Some bloodlines are not compatible with carnivorous lifestyles. They have to be vegan, vegetarian, etc. How do you know who to marry with? How do you know whose bloodline to mix with? You don't, unless you talk to your elders. This is why we need to go back to having our own schools, our own libraries, our own medicine, our own herbs, our own way of doing things, our own republics, our own laws, our own governance, our own policy enforcers as we traverse on this land and go into the golden age, because our crown chakra corona has been activated. We cannot trust the enemy. We get upset when we learn that the enemy has done things that enemies do. We were upset when they unalived us with the shots that they gave us during that particular time. We were upset when we found out that certain things cause autism. I got to be careful. I know I could get flagged for this. We got upset when they miseducated our children, but we turn over our children willingly to the enemy. And then we say, how dare you misinform us? How dare you miseducate my child, enemy? It's time for us to wake up, because a person who doesn't know his origins is like a tree without roots. Speaking of roots, let's talk about roots. Let's talk about the show Roots that came out in the 1980s, 1990s, that whole series that was published and produced by Alex Haley, an African-American man. Roots, with these co-stars that he had, the stars. Remember Chicken George, Kunta Kinte. I was born in 1968. If you were born around my time period, you know about Roots. It was a slave story that talked about Alex Haley's alleged family, Chicken George, Kunta Kinte, Kizzy, and all these people who were subject to massa in a big house on a plantation. Well, they came from African slave ships from Africa because their ancestors were sold by Africans to Europeans, and they were brought here through the transatlantic slave system. That series was produced in the 1980s, and it went night after night after night after night after night until they fully indoctrinated you that Black people came from Africa, and that their own ancestors and elders sold them to so-called white people, and white people should feel guilty for what their ancestors allegedly did to them. So then you had a further racial divide that was that further than what had already existed here in America. Because you have people classified as white feeling guilty, people classified as Black saying, I'm a perpetual victim, I'm nothing, I'm nobody, I'm a slave, I'll forever be a slave. So then the movie Roots, or the series Roots, then had spinoffs. And then they had Hollywood productions every single year. I'm a slave, 12 years a slave, 1,000 years a slave, my mammy's a slave, my pappy's a slave. Massa always beat me, Django, all these slave stories to indoctrinate people all over the world. And then when people came from other nations here to America, they are briefed. Trust me, I know a lot of Africans who reveal this, even Europeans and people who have told me. When people, even Hispanics, I'm Hispanic in case you didn't know, Hispanic. My great grandfather came from Colombia. Even some people from Hispanic or Latin countries will tell you, many of them and Arab nations are briefed when they come to the Americas. We'll give you money, we'll give you resources, we'll give you loans with no interest or low interest bearing loans. You have everything you desire here in America, and they allow them to tap into the trust of the indigenous people here and of all the Americans, but specifically the indigenous people here and the resources, and live on the land and tell these people in their briefings, stay away from Black people. You can put your stores and your gas stations and your drugs in their community. A lot of the Arabs that are here that have gas stations infiltrate the community and bring in drugs with the help of the police departments. That's why you see a lot of police cars that are around the Arab markets. I know what I'm talking about. In the hood. But stay away from those Black people. Siphon their energy, take their money, have stores, call it convenience stores, but it's not real food. There's just junk food, candy, cookies, pop, gas, chips, all the stuff that doesn't nourish your body or your blood, but don't help them. And don't put any money in their community. Don't mate with them. They're briefed when they come here. Okay. They're briefed when they come to stay away from Black Americans and that they are better than all Americans. That's why some of them are so arrogantly waving their flag and sticking up their middle finger to the president of the greatest country and the largest economy of the world. Because they've been briefed that it's okay to do that with the backing of liberals and other politicians who allowed this foolishness to happen. But remember, I said a lot of this was allowed to happen because they enslaved us. They had a whole lot of resets because the bottom line is the beings that enslaved the planet desires to unalive all human beings. Their preference was the blood, the DNA, the organs, the uterus, and the genetic code of the indigenous people because they are the autogenous people, the oldest indigenous peoples of the Americas and the oldest indigenous peoples of the world. The United Nations said that in 1985, that the Black Americans are the oldest indigenous peoples of the world. We know that we sprung from the soil. That's what autogenous means. The same dirt and genetic code that's in the soil is the same genetic code and DNA that's in, or codes that's in our colon. And then from the indigenous people, according to some scientists, all people came. So we're all one. We all came from each other. We all living on this land mass, and we all come from source. But let's get back to roots. You, no matter where you come from, need to know your origins and your roots. It's important to talk to your elders, to read the books that they left for you, to read any instructions that they left for you, to sit at the feet of the elders and learn about what's best for your bloodline, learn about the wealth that they left for you, learn about the country of your origin. That's important. That's why they have us putting our elders in the nursing homes away from us. This is not to make anybody feel guilty or bad. This is just about uncovering the lies, the things, the malicious things that they did to us. If they have you putting your elders in a nursing home or in a retirement center away from you, and they have you so busy working that you can't take care of them, and they have them so sick that you don't even know how to address what's best for their bloodline, what's best for their DNA, because you don't know. You've been misinformed. I've been misinformed. We're all tired of the enslavement here on the planet. So it's important, family, to gain control of your life, of your story, your history, her story, your culture. Gain control today. Take control of your elders, your children, your marriages, your person that you've entered into covenant with, your medicine, your herbs, your foods. Study your blood. Why do you think they're always taking your blood every time you go to the hospital? Every freaking time you go to the emergency room, every time you have a checkup, every time you see a medical professional, they want your blood because they're studying it. Because the beings that are in power, that are in control, that's in alignment with, or are the Anunnaki beings and the other extraterrestrial beings that enslaved the planet, want to discover what's in your blood that makes you different from them. What is it about you, that God spark, that source of life that allows you to emote, to love, to care? That you love people so much you don't want to unalive people. You don't do it. You follow rules. They don't. They can unalive a whole human race and feel absolutely nothing. But they want to know what is special about you and me. And they need your blood to survive. And your womb to procreate and bring about their babies that they mix with other genetics. Okay, so they've had so many different resets. But let's get back to a person who does not know his or her origins is like a tree without roots. The show Roots was discovered to be a fallacy, a lie, faux pas, fake, not nonfiction, but fictitious, a fictitious story that had many spin-offs. Harold Corlander is a man of European descent, a Caucasian man who sued Alex Haley over the movie Roots. And he won his claim and said Alex Haley plagiarized the story from Harold Corlander's book called The African. He stole the story, the characters from the book called The African, and he made it his own, and he won his case. A lot of people don't know that. Roots' story was fiction. Hollywood productions, Hollywood movies to make you think that African Americans or Black people were sold into slavery by their own people to Caucasians and Europeans. Now, while some of that might have happened on the large scale, it is not true. What in fact did happen, according to many researchers, is that the indigenous people here were sent to other places like Africa and enslaved. But for the most part, the indigenous people here, the copper-colored races found here by Europeans, that's the 1828 Webster's definition of American, they have always been here. You can fact check me, read the accounts of colonizers and Europeans that came here. Read the account of Christopher Columbus. And why is it that he happened to come here in 1492 after the Moors were kicked out of Spain? The Moors controlled Spain and Europe from 1711 to 1492. Then they got kicked out and they came here and brought Europeans with them. But who were these Moors that came here that brought Europeans with them? And why did they do it? I'll leave that for another podcast. They sure wasn't like us. They wasn't us. They might look like us, but they ain't us. And that's why we have many wars here on this land between the M-O-O-R-S and the M-U-U-R-S. The indigenous, autogenous, M-U-U-R-S here had wars with the M-O-O-R-S from Europe, the so-called dirty Moors that brought Europeans here. And the Europeans only wanted to escape the unaliving of their children, the eating of their children, the enslavement of their women, the sexual enslavement and abuse of their women. They brought them here, and then they brought they brought prisoners here because it was a war. It was a war against the autogenous indigenous peoples here. The so-called dirty Moors, I don't even like saying that, but this is what I'm hearing. Even Christopher Columbus was melanated. Brought them here in 1492, the Europeans here, and set up colonies, gave them some benefits, and then allowed them to be in certain places, because the cheapest way to colonize a landmass is not by bringing in the military. The cheapest way to colonize a landmass is actually to bring in colonizers. Because when you bring in a group of people who need help, who are trying to escape a very, very harsh condition where they came from, all they know is they got a better opportunity, better land. They're learning new things. They were in treaty with the indigenous people here. They didn't know they were being used. Even some of the Europeans that went to Canada, fact check me, Benjamin Forford just released a video where he said his people are from European descent. They escaped what was going on in Europe and went to Canada, and they had allegiances and treaties with the indigenous Canadians there. And then other Europeans, he said, my family member was good with the indigenous people, but other Canadians start coming in from all over the place. We're getting benefits from the ones who brought them there. And then they start colonizing the indigenous people in Canada. Same thing happened here. Why did I quote Benjamin Forford? He is a well-known publisher and geopolitical analyst from Canada now, but from Europe, who actually lives in Canada, who worked for Forbes. And he was uncovering so many secrets about what was going on geopolitically that he is now under protection from many ancient indigenous dynasties and ancient Chinese families. Look him up, Benjamin Forford. Some of you know of him. So the same thing occurred here in America. If you read the book called The Prince by Machiavelli, he tells you that there are two ways to have war on a landmass. You can either bring in the military, but it's very, very costly. You have to house them, feed them, train them, etc. Or you can bring in a whole nother group of people who are dependent on you, who are looking for a way out, who are only looking for a way for their family members. But you can, over time, encourage them and entice them to overcome the indigenous people by putting them in key places like politics, like banking, like research, like medicine, like education. And that's what happened. And then we had Chief Rod Hayes to tell us that blackface, when you saw the minstrels dancing on the stage in Hollywood productions, there were Caucasian people that had black skin and, showed their red lips, were actually trying to tell a story that, hey, we're not really running things. It's the Moors that came from Europe, the really, really dark complected Moors. I guess they were saying they were dark. That's why they wore the black paint. They're using us. And then it came out later that the Ku Klux Klan was started by these people, these beings that made it with humans from out of Europe, that they were actually dark-skinned people, the Moors, who actually created the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. That's why they wear a hood. But you look at some of the old pictures, you look at the hand, you see that they're dark complected. Not only some of the Moors from Europe, but also some of the black nobility right from here from America who sold their own people out. But let's get back to roots. A person who doesn't know their origin is like a tree without its roots. So when people start realizing that movies like Roots and Hollywood spinoffs were a lie, they started studying, where did I come from? Talking to some of their elders and taking some of their DNA tests, only to find out that some of these DNA tests told them they came from tribes in Africa. Well, how is it that indigenous people here blood traced to tribes in Africa when their grandparents, great-grandparents, great, and their papers, their documents say they've always been here? Well, some of them may have come from Africa, but you see, many of the so-called African presidents were in on the lie, in on the hoax, because the African presidents, just like presidents here in America and presidents in the Middle East and presidents in Asia, they all work together. It's a secret club, secret society, a secret group. If you haven't seen my video with Sheikh Jacob Bey on secret societies, secret brotherhoods that run the world and how we decoded their messages, you got to go see it, because we talked about how this brotherhood and even sisterhood, but mostly brotherhood, work together to keep people enslaved. So even presidents in Africa and all over the world have to do the bidding of these beings that are in power. That's being dismantled now, family. It's a great time to be alive. So people were taking DNA tests and realizing that they allegedly came from the indigenous people. They allegedly came from African tribe. So they bought into the story that you came from the transatlantic slavery mission that happened. Not even thinking about how that's the roughest set of waters on the planet. And they said we were naked, piled on ships with nothing, no food, coming across the waters from Africa all the way to the Americas, and somehow thousands and hundreds of thousands of them survived. Well, where are the ships? Where are the ships? Because you would think that if somebody colonized the whole place, they would have ships in the museum. I've been to the Smithsonian. It's not there. The only ships that survived this so-called transatlantic slave mission are the ones that are in writing, the drawings, but no real ships. Where are they? So they did that so that the indigenous peoples could think they came from Africa and do not lay claims to the Americas. As long as you tell them, look over here, you won't look here and realize that you're a prisoner of war who was enslaved and used to pay off the debt of the United States Corporation. The corporation, United States Corporation, a group of bloodline families that usurped authority from our republic, enslaved the people here, made them prisoners of war, and used them to pay off debt. A United States corporation, you see the word corpse, is dead. They speak to you in codes because those that are dead cannot speak to us natural people. They speak in coded messages. They were incorporated in 1871 as a nonprofit religious organization with the Pope as the head of it, and that's how they call themselves a religious organization. They lied to us. They used African Americans to pay off the debt, and then they used everybody to pay off their debts. If you don't believe me, you can look at my video on motu proprio. In that video, I read a letter by Pope Francis, who said, we're a corporation, we're not the real government. The United States of Incorporation has presidents. They're not presidents of America. They're presidents of the corporation. We must cease and desist. All presidents, all attorneys, all judges must cease and desist. All court systems, all policy enforcers known as police officers, all systems connected to the United States Incorporated has to cease and desist. And if we don't, these are Pope Francis' words. He wrote this letter and sent it to Obama in 2014. If we don't, General Ham will be used as the general of the Grand Army of the Republic, and they will force a dismantling of the entire system. That's where we are today. That's why President Trump reminds you of General George Patton, his father, who some people say was his real father, who was a general, a military general. He's also a real estate professional who's turning over the real estate in the Americas to the true autogenous African Americans or indigenous peoples here on the planet. That's why President Trump tasked Elon Musk with coming up with DOGE, or the Department of Government Efficiency, to downsize the government, because the Supreme Court of the United States ruled in 2024 that the United States Incorporated was a fake government, that they had been using unlimited powers through the Chevron doctrine. So they had to overturn it, and they had to be dismantled because they are unconstitutional and treasonous. How many organizations are government agencies? 442 of them. And that is why we had the government shutdown. It all goes back to not just the overturning of the Chevron doctrine by the Supreme Court of the United States last year, but it also goes back to motu proprio, when Pope Francis said it's over for us. Behind the scenes, the true Moors here, the indigenous peoples on the planet here, are doing things to bankrupt, or have done things to bankrupt, the United States Incorporated and bankrupt the Federal Reserve central banking system. That's why when you see the bankrupt form of the United States Incorporated, you see the name that is a Moorish name. You see the stamp of the Moors, because the Moors are behind President Trump to return the land back to the autogenous indigenous people here in America. And anybody who remains here, that aligns with the 5 tenets of the dynasty that was here: love, truth, freedom, peace, and justice. So a lot of people are leaving. They don't want to deal with a return back to the Republic. They don't want to give up the money that they made living off and feeding off the indigenous peoples here, and feeding off the colonists that came here. They don't want these. There are very, very wealthy people that have already fled America. There were people, they had discussions about this, that went to the moon or went to Mars. Mars is not a planet in the sky. Mars is another landmass behind the ice walls. Many elites and presidents and people who work with these bloodline families to enslave humanity are rewarded by going to Mars. That's why they've gone to Mars. So people recently took DNA tests to discover who they are. No longer do we talk to our elders. Well, for everybody, that should be a concern. Why? We just learned that the study revealed that a lot of errors were found in these DNA testing and with the technology. They lied to you so they can control you. But if we get to my bloodline, recently there was a banned DNA study that exposed the shocking truth of the origins of so-called Black Americans. The article suggests that in a startling twist, this publication sent shockwaves through the nation, because a recently banned DNA study revealed that the true origins of Black Americans may be more complex than previously thought. This groundbreaking research uncovered a shocking connection to indigenous tribes, challenging the long-held narratives of the singular history rooted in slavery. In other words, a study came out that's banned They're not allowing it to be publicized in mainstream media. They're not allowing the students to talk about it or the teachers to read it out in class. This banned DNA study revealed the true origins of so-called Black American people being connected to indigenous tribes here in the Americas. Very interesting. I'll bring up the article. Okay, I'm getting a message saying that they're having problems streaming to a Facebook group. So I'll just take it out. So I'm going to bring this article up for you, family. Let me know what you think so far. People ask me, why are you so concerned with your bloodline or indigenous people? Because it's my bloodline. Because a person without knowing their origins is like a tree without roots. And I just told you, this isn't something that's just about us, indigenous people. Everybody may have been lied to, unless you got the story from your family members. If they lied to one, they lied to all. And yes, the first law of nature, yes, it's self-preservation, but the first universal law is that law of oneness. We all come from source. We're all one with each other. We're all one with the animals, the plants, the insects, because we all come from source. But we're talking today about how they lied to us. And you see, I have a lot of ads that are trying to cover up this story. Somebody said I'm speaking facts. Thank you. Oh yeah, they lied. And it's a time of truth. All we want to know is the truth. Everything they taught us typically has been actually taught in reverse. That's why Sheikh Jacob Bey says you got to look for signs and symbols that show you the reverse. So when you see H, you know that they're talking about reversal of things. That's why Chief Mac goes on his channel and talks so much about what's really true. You know, he talks about ancient Tartaria. He talks about Moorish ancestry and buildings and how they're speaking in codes, showing us what's actually going on in the world, because it's time that we know the truth. Okay, good question. Thank you. How can anyone be sure that there isn't a planet called Mars when the most people haven't been outside of the Earth's atmosphere? Because some of the people that allegedly have been outside of Earth's atmosphere, that live in the Ancestral Republic and have been to Mars, have books and libraries filled of books. Some of them have returned and they're sharing this information, and it's up to us to determine or to discern whether or not they're true. But it makes a lot of sense when you put, all the information together. That's a good question. I would just say read the books and see if it resonates with you. A lot of this stuff we won't know, right? But they're saying that information will come out. Why is it that they don't want us to see this article? What's going on here? Banned DNA study exposes the true origins of Black Americans. That's the article there it is. I'm trying to show you. A groundbreaking DNA study, which has been controversially banned from mainstream discourse, is challenging long-held beliefs and revealing shocking truths about the ancestry of Black Americans. This is published by USA Today. This revelation is igniting conversations across social media platforms and with many researchers and just people, everyday people that are eager to uncover the hidden history, the hidden story. Why? Why is this hidden? Because history is his story. It's always told from the perspective of the colonizer or from the perspective of the one who won the war. They say this truth has been overlooked for generations. But what does the DNA reveal according to this article? The recently banned DNA study uncovered evidence suggesting, you like the way they say suggesting, they don't want to come out and say revealing, suggesting that many Black Americans have roots that trace back to indigenous tribes, challenging the conventional narrative that primarily associates them with the transatlantic slave trade. Why would you tell somebody they came from slavery. Because if you can tell them they came from a whole nother landmass way across the Atlantic, you can disinherit them from the land here. You can make them feel like they're nothing, they're nobodies. That's why you give them the classification of Black, because Black literally means, according to the Black's Law Dictionary, the law dictionary that the people in power use, Black literally means dead, no legal standing. You have no standing in law. That's why they categorize African Americans, indigenous people, autogenous people here in America as Black. You're dead. You're a slave. You have no standing in law. You're nothing. You come from nothing but slavery. And we'll produce movie after movie and book after book to say that. And then we'll create diseases and say it was because the African had exe or relations with the monkey. And that's where AIDS come from. So you little African booty scratchers that came from that landmass, you made it with the green monkey and created a whole disease that's unaliving the planet. What does that do to your psyche? If you tell a lie long enough, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. On the other side of that, if you tell Europeans that all of your fathers and mothers enslaved these great big Mandingo warriors, brought them to America, put them on plantations, raped all of them, you can make them feel guilty, and you can create critical race theory to make all the children that are from European descent feel guilty, and the ones from indigenous descent feel like they're a perpetual victim. And you cause this divide so that you can enslave them all. Researchers utilize advanced genetic testing to analyze the DNA of various individuals across the United States, leading to startling conclusions, according to the article, about the heritage of Black Americans. It's only startling to them. They're lying. They're not startled. They knew the truth. That's why a lot of our artifacts are either hidden in the Vatican or hidden in the Smithsonian and other museums. Why do you think they have museums? To hide the truth. According to the findings, a significant percentage of individuals tested shows genetic markers linking so-called Black Americans to Native Americans, or I call it indigenous tribes, indicating a complex history that intertwines both African and indigenous ancestries, so says the publisher of this article. They lied to us, family. Why they lie? Why they lie? Because they wanted to enslave the whole planet. That's why they lied. Everybody was in on this hoax. Leaders from all over the world, some African leaders, not everybody, but people in power. Because if you don't do what they say, when you join the brotherhood, they'll unalive you and your whole family, and they'll take away your wealth. So a lot of people were either tricked into going along with the lie, unalive their family members so they could go along with the lie, or they were compelled to go along with the lie in order to get money and wealth. Just in case you didn't know it, I told you this already. The 1828 Webster's definition of America is very, very telling. And somebody here in my group told me that there are other definitions of American that go way back beyond 1828 that talks about American, the original and definition of American actually being the indigenous peoples that were here, the copper-colored races, not the Mongoloids, not the Asians. The Native Americans. Native means you were born on the land, but you didn't spring from the soil. There's a difference between Native American and natural American. That's why, in order to be a president, the founding fathers framed the precursor, or the definition, or the what am I trying to say? The forefathers said that in order to be a president, you have to be natural born, and you have to be subject to the jurisdiction of the state in which you were born. So you could be subject to the jurisdiction of the state in which you were born and be from another place. But in order to be natural born, you have to spring from the soil. So in order to be a president of the republic, you have to be natural born. Look it up. The founding fathers laid the groundwork for who can be president: natural born American and subject to the jurisdiction in the state in which you were born. Native American is different from natural American. A Native American is from somewhere else, from where you came from, your nativity, but you were born here. So Native Americans, the ones that live in teepees, they're squatters. They came from Asian areas and they escaped many wars and were allowed to come here. And they married with the autogenous indigenous people here, also known as African American. But let's look at the 1828 Webster's definition of American. A noun, give me 10 more minutes, family. A native of America, originally applied to the aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of the Europeans. You can come in. Give me a few more minutes. Now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. So when they say that there were some DNA tests that showed that we and Black Americans came from certain indigenous tribes, they're just telling a story. Okay, that we already knew because our grandparents and great grandparents said you got Indian in your family, and they told us you're Cherokee, you're Choctaw, you're Washita, you're Ashita, you're Blackfoot. They told us that, but when we went to the schools, we were lied to. Now, my mother told me she never heard a slave story. She never heard she was from Africa. That's something new. She said, when y'all were born in the 60s, they told y'all that lie. We never were told that. We trying to figure out why y'all came home and told us those lies that you came from Africa. We trying to figure out why you talking about this Jamaican dude that told you you need to all go back to Africa. We trying to figure out why all these so-called Pan-Africanists are saying you need to go back home to Africa. And then when you get to Africa, the so-called motherland, they tell you we never sold you. We're not the same. Nigerians would tell you, Ghanaians would tell you that. A lot of people from the continent of Africa, from various different tribes, will say, you're not the same, Black Americans. We not. Why would we sell our people? And even if we were forced to do that, we'd come back for you. They tell you that they're not the same. They lied to us, family. It's important to know because, again, as long as they can lie to you, they can enslave you and control you, no matter where you come from. I've said many times, the United Nations said in 1985, when the Empress of the Washita Moors, the Ashita people in Louisiana, took the United States Incorporated to the world courts and sued them over stealing her land over the Louisiana Purchase, which is really the Louisiana theft that took a lot of the land here. She took the United States Corporation to court and won her claim in the amount of $85 quadrillion. Then she spoke from the United Nations that this is our land. We need it returned. You guys stole from us. You lied to the world. You lied to the indigenous, autogenous people here, and you owe us money. And she won her claims in the amount of $85 quadrillion. Then she spoke from the United Nations and held up her proof. There are many people that's watching this show right now who knew Empress Bertiasi Gaston L. Turner Bay. Some of you were with her. Some of you knew her children, and you know that the United Nations declared in 1985 that the Black Americans were the oldest indigenous peoples on the planet. Wake up, people called Black African American. They changed your classification from indigenous, get out his face, and told you were Black. Then they changed it to Negro. Then they changed it to color. Then they changed it to Black again. Then they changed it to African American, which really is the classification of produce and meats. And some say that that name African American is actually owned by Jesse Jackson, and that he was commissioned with coming up with a new terminology for the indigenous people here in 1978. You can look up African American now, and it will say produce and meats, the classification of categorizing of produce and meats. You can look up Walter Plecker and see how he and the Census Bureau changed your categorization from Indian, indigenous to Black, colored, Negro. And then more people change us back to Black. And if you ask your aunties and uncles who are from the 50s and 60s, they'll tell you Black was something you didn't call indigenous peoples. It was a derogatory term. And that leads me to, if you don't believe me, and I'll have to print up an article later where the Washita people says that the United Nations declared the indigenous people from Americas to be the oldest indigenous people on the planet, then I'm going to show you this article where Colombia's president told the whole world from the United Nations that Black people are the only true indigenous peoples of the Americas. And I'm very proud of the Colombian president for saying that, because my great-grandfather is from Colombia. And in one specific part of the article, not only did it shows that he said that, but there's another place at the 10-30-minute mark of the video. I'm going to pull it up. He says only Black-skinned people here, he's talking about in Colombia, those who are the ancestrals here, they've been ancestral from this landmass for thousands of years. They've been here. They've been here for thousands of years. That's what the Colombian president said about the dark complected Colombians there. And then he went on to say that only the Black people are the true indigenous peoples of the Americas. Let me bring that up for you. This is very important for people who were trying to figure out, where did I come from? Who am I? Is it true that I'm from African tribes? And it's hard to believe. Why would we believe? We just showed you in the beginning of the podcast that now they're coming out with information and truths that a lot of genetic testing have errors in it. And if, in case you didn't know it, 123andMe and some of these other DNA tests are owned by the Mormons. Who are the Mormons? Are they the true Moors, or are they the ones that keeping the secrets of the Moors, or the true indigenous people here? We need to know that. How is it that they own so many companies in America? Why are they allowed to practice polygyny, which is an indigenous way of life from some indigenous tribes? Why are they allowed to have secrets? The Church of Latter-day Saints, why did they say that the Black people were the devil and could never be a part of their organization? Who are the Mormons? Because they don't look like Moors to me, but they own a lot of these DNA tests. Why would we believe anybody outside your own bloodline and outside your own family? They even said Black people were cursed. Why? Here's an article dated November 15th. Colombia's president tells the world from the United Nations, Black people are the true indigenous of the Americas. It's just going along with what we've already been told by our fathers, our forefathers. What we see with the 1828 Webster's definition of America, AMER'ICAN. A noun, a native of America, born in America, originally applied to the aboriginals. People say ab means against, ab means not. No, ab, the etymology of ab actually means from. You can say it means against or whatever or not, but it means from. Look it up. Look up the etymology. American, a native of America, originally applied to aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of the Europeans. It can be applied all day long, but that don't mean that you're American. You can call yourself something, that doesn't mean that's who you are. But if there's a treaty between the two, then let the treaties abide. Some of those treaties have not been honored, but with the turning of everything back over to the indigenous peoples, we're going to ensure that those treaties are acknowledged and kept and honored. A native of America originally applied to the aboriginals or copper-colored races. Why do you think they're talking about copper all of a sudden? Why do you think silver and copper was added to the critical minerals list for the United States of America? Why do you think President Trump made a note of not only ending paper straws, because the straw man has been done away with, so says Dr. Kia Pruitt, but he's also talking about getting rid of the 1 cent that you call penny. I don't call it penny anymore because it's not a penny. The penny is from Europe. We had something called 1 cent. Your coin dealer can educate you on that. But the so-called penny is copper colored. They're getting rid of it because we don't need that anymore. We're returning everything back over to the indigenous copper colored races. Watch, the news is going to start talking about copper. People are going to start talking about copper. Economists are going to start saying get copper. That's why it went from 89 cents to $2.99 per ounce overnight, because it was added to the critical minerals list for the United States of America. Copper will be in the mouths and the tongue of many people because, again, these corporations are speaking in code. Everything is being returned back to the indigenous peoples here in America, who are the aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans. And anybody that wants to stay here, they can, because we have treaties as long as they abide by the principles of the dynasty. You can look up the Moroccan flag. It's red. It has a green 5-pointed star. It hangs in the White House along with the red, white, and blue flag, which is not a flag. It is a banner of commerce. They call it the flag without the gold fringes. It's the peacetime flag with the gold fringes. It is a wartime flag. It is a banner of commerce that the Europeans had here because they were allowed to have their own banner to do commerce with each other. And they had peace agreements with the indigenous people here. Some of them intermarried. They got along. We taught each other different things. We taught them how to grow corn and how to grow certain things that were indigenous to our peoples and our land, because they came all the way from Europe, which is a very, very cold place. It was very, very harsh. And before they even came here, some of them were taught how to do things like how to cook, how to wear certain clothes, how to bathe in certain ways, because they were European, are actually a new so-called race of people. That's science. That's not nothing that's new. But what matters is that we all live together and we can all live in harmony as long as we stand united as one and get rid of those people or those beings that enslaved us, that's trying to wreak havoc in our country and on our landmass. Colombia challenges Columbus's myth, the untold history of Black Americans. Some people said we didn't do that willingly. So I have family here, so I need to expedite this. Am I in the right place? We're going to scroll down here because it talks about how there are publications that said that Black people, so-called Black people and Latin Americans actually came from Negroid descent and had Negroid features. And they go ahead and they talk about different publishers who talked about that. In History of Mexico, Volume 1, he devoted considerable space to the prehistoric Negro in America and mentions one early Negro god, Extilton. Now and then, however, some American writers will say that they were Negroes. Ignatius Donnelly in his Atlantis 1882 publication gives indisputable proof of Negro idols on the monuments, but squares matters by saying that these ancient Negroes were brought to the Americas as slaves. That's what he says. The best proof that Negroes were here, however, is that the earliest Spanish explorers saw them when they came to America. Columbus in his third voyage mentioned them, the indigenous Americans, the aboriginal copper-colored people. Balboa, in his discovery of the Pacific in 1513, saw a whole tribe of them in Panama, as told by Peter Martyr, historian of the times. Magellan saw short, woolly-haired people in southern Brazil in 1519, as related to Pigafetti. It's not true that people in Brazil came from Africa. Maybe some of them did, but they were already there. They were already in Panama. They were already here in the Americas and in Colombia. They were already here. You can read Dr. Ivan Van Sertima's book called They Came Before Columbus. He lays out how there were Negro people here when Columbus came here. After extensive research on the subject, this publisher says, I've come to the conclusion that if the so-called New World was really people from the so-called Old, that it was from three sources, from Asia through Alaska, from the Pacific, yada, yada, yada. You can read the Pittsburgh Courier publication of that article. Then there's an abstract of an article that examines a constellation of historical claims from Latin American ethnologists, early Spanish explorers, and diffusionist scholars asserting that Black people or Negroid peoples existed in the Americas prior to the transatlantic slave trade. These claims resurfacing in the New Pittsburgh Courier originate in sources ranging from Peter Martyr in 1511 to Riva Palacio in 1880 to Braguin in 1940. But this blog here that I'm from, which I'm reading, synthesizes their observations and connects the statement that was made by a Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, at the United Nations. He affirmed that Black-skinned ancestral populations have lived in the Americas for thousands of years. Thousands of years. This intersection of historical documentation and contemporary international acknowledgement exposes a suppressed truth about Indigenous identity in the Americas. It'll go on here to talk about how Christopher Columbus talked about the existence of Black-skinned people and woolly-haired people throughout the Western Hemisphere. This came out. Now, President is going to talk about President Columbia's statement and how what he says aligns with the suppressed history that Black people are originally from the Americas, but they'll say they came from African nations in order to disinherit them from the land. This information, this new information, is suppressed history that's coming out in 2025. It was unexpected according to this publication, but it echoes on the world stage, not by activists, not by academics, but by a sitting head of the state from Colombia addressing the United Nations. At one point, he said only Black people are the indigenous people from the Americas. And then at the 10-minute mark of this particular video, I'm going to put this in the description section for you. He says only the Black-skinned people here, those who are ancestral here for thousands of years, have been here. And I'll let you read the rest of that here. Here is where he says only the Black people who are ancestral have been here for thousands of years. They actually wrote it out for you. And it goes on to talk about why this is important information. It's important for people to know from whence they came. It's important for a Colombian president to tell the truth because he's addressing the world. He has the authority to do so. And it goes on to talk about the claims here. Why is it important? And it talks about Colonel A. Braguin in his work called The Shadow of Atlantis. He compiled centuries of explorer accounts to argue for global prehistoric context. He claims many ancient American monuments present clear depictions of Negroes in the Americas. He cited early Spanish chronicles who saw Black tribes along the Pacific and Atlantic coasts. And it gives all the sources. It gives more works, more sources to support their claim. Why were these claims rejected and suppressed? From the 19th to the mid-20th century, American anthropology adopted racial uniformity as dogma. This created several pressures to deny, number one, to deny phenotypical diversity in the Americas. Black featured indigenous groups conflicted with the all natives are mongoloid model taught in the United States universities. To protect the myth of isolated continent as well. Thirdly, to maintain racial classification systems in the United States. Why do they want to maintain racial classification systems? In order to get us fighting each other, to think one group is better than the other and another is lesser than another, to create critical race theory so you can continually perpetuate that dogma, to create movies and roots and slave movies to pit two groups of people. It's called divide and conquer. Another reason to lie is to silence evidence supporting Black indigenous identity. Then they bring out the conclusion. Suppressed information is important to note, the article says. The New Pittsburgh Courier article was not inventing anything. It was summarizing what centuries of explorers, historians, and ethnologists had already documented. Namely, that one, dark-skinned, woolly-haired people living in Florida, Panama, and Brazil existed before slavery. Two, Negroid features in Mesoamerican sculptures and religions religious iconography existed. 3, pre-Columbian depictions of Black gods or deities were in the Americas. 4, testimony from recognized Latin American scholars acknowledge African-like features in ancient American population. All of these sources provide documented proof and record that challenges the rhetoric that so-called Black people came from the African continent. Kudos to Gustavo from Colombia, who stood 10 toes down and told his truth. He said, Black people are the true indigenous of the Americas. Let me go ahead and put that in the chat so people can read it. And you can do more further research to see if that's true, if it resonates with you. We've all been lied to, is my point. But now it's time for us to stand 10 toes down on our square, know who you are, be proud about your heritage, love your heritage, support and embrace your culture. Because you know what? Everybody's allowed to say, I'm from Scotland, I'm from Ireland, I'm from this tribe in Africa, I'm from this Arabian Peninsula, I'm from here. But as soon as so-called Black Americans say I'm indigenous, it's a problem. Why are you making this about race? Why you people always got to talk about who's indigenous and who's not? But it's all, but forever, everybody can say who they are and where they came from. But the moment you recognize you're not a slave, you never was a slave, your mama wasn't a slave, your daddy wasn't a slave, your grandfather, your grandmother, your great-grandparents, your great-grandparents, because you've read the documents, you've seen the birth certificate, you look at all the facts. You hire people to do the research and you say, I've never been a slave. I sprung from the soil. My people sprung from the soil. I'm a proud indigenous American. Then all of a sudden you're racist and you're causing division. Why is that? Maybe it's because we become so complacent and comfortable with the lies, and we become so complacent with and comfortable with people from all over the planet benefiting from the enslavement of the indigenous, autogenous, so-called Black races here, that we don't want to imagine what it's like for the oppressed people to stand up and say, I'm autogenous. I'm proud of who I am. I know who I am. I was not a slave. I've had land here for thousands of years. And that is the truth about what a plantation is. It is not something that a European came. How can a European come who recently was taught culture by the Moors in Europe and come here as slaves, all of a sudden own all this land? But you're going to tell me the indigenous people were enslaved on a plantation? The plantation belonged to the indigenous peoples. And it was run by in the inside, the house Negro, on the outside, the field Negro. Okay? Chief Pontiac, Chief Hayes taught us that. The field Negro, the chief Negro who was whipping the so-called Black slave, was the one that really came in to take over Big Mama's house. That was the plantation. And the European had some type of dealings with them, but he did not own the land. A lot of what we were taught in slavery was not the truth. It was in reverse. Slavs were the first slaves in here. Slavic people are not copper colored. When the Italians from Sicily came here, they were not even allowed to participate in the economy. Neither were the Irish, because they were considered Negro because they had Negro Moorish blood. That's why you had the mafia here, because the Sicilians were not allowed to participate in the economy. They had Negro blood. They will tell you to this day, my grandmama was a Moor. This, again, the indigenous people here were erroneously classified as Black, Negro, and colored. That Black, it means slave, it means dead. You have no standing in law. Their original classification was white, because you own the land here. The slaves, the Slavics, the Europeans that came, their original categorization was called Black. I have friends that are from European descent that says, why is it that black people will get reparations, but nobody talks about white people getting reparations? My people were enslaved. I say, you are absolutely correct. They won't teach that in the history books, because if we know the truth that we were all enslaved, then we'll get together and we'll fight and beat the people in power. Let's wake up together. Let's wake up together. Let's stand together, learn our history, your history, not told from the aspect or perspective of the beings that colonized us, but told from the perspective of your ancestors. And let's stand on it and be proud of it and embrace it. We got Hispanic Cultural Awareness Month here. We got this cultural awareness. I don't think y'all do white people, are white Caucasian Europeans allowed to have European Awareness Month? Like, how about we all embrace who we are from whence we came and teach it to our own children in our own schools that we create, and stop handing them over to the Rockefeller controlled educational system? How about that? Family, it's time for us to wake up. Are you ready to wake up? Because I am. I'm awake now. We've entered a whole new reality. The golden era, the Aquarius, age of Aquarius. And the reason why I said I'm proud of the Colombian president that stood up and spoke, yes, Christ will unite us, and the Christos consciousness awakening too will unite us. I'm very proud of the Colombian president for speaking this truth, because my great-grandfather is Colombian. This is my great-grandfather. He died in 1974. I was 6 years old. My great-grandfather passed, and when he passed, he gave my grandmother these bundles of, these, what they call it, velvet bags, like dark blue. I still remember, I was 6. Dark blue, some purplish bags with gold on the inside and lots of coins. Silver. May have been gold, but I remember the silver coins. He bequeathed to his great-grandchildren, my brother and me. We were the oldest two. We're the only two at the time. But my mother, not knowing the value of precious metals, real silver, 1974, we had just come off the silver, not long ago, come off the silver and gold standard. He had them in bags. He owned several houses, lots of land, had lots of money in the bank, thousands, hundreds of thousands, and silver and gold. And the family who wasn't taught to be proud of the inheritance that their father and grandfather left them, squandered it and gave it away. They didn't know any better. That's why you have to teach asset protection. You have to teach your family about wealth. Don't just accumulate wealth. Don't just accumulate foreign currencies and gold and silver, but educate your family members. Put it in a trust. He gave it to my grandmother. He gave land and houses and money to my grandmother, who had been orphaned as a child because my great-grandfather came here from Colombia. He couldn't get a job. He was selling moonshine. He and his wife, who he got from the indigenous tribe of the Blackfoot, she copper-colored woman. He married her. They had children, but because they were selling moonshine, that's the story we heard. I apologize if I lost you. I lost you. I couldn't see. The children were taken away. But he married a woman from the Blackfoot Nation, is what we're called, what we're told. And he owned many houses and land, but he gave it to my grandmother because they sold moonshine, which was illegal alcohol at the time. Their children were taken away. They were put in orphanages, his children. This is his wife. They were put in orphanages and they were abused by nuns and priests and all that. My grandmother told me the story. Not my great-grandmother, but her and my great-grandfather's child. So my great-grandfather is Manuel Gomez. He married a woman from the Blackfoot Nation. They had a child. My grandmother, Dolores Gomez, told me the story about how they were orphans and they were mistreated when she became an adult or almost an adult. She broke out of the orphanage, found her brother, and then fled from Cleveland, Ohio, where they were all born, to Portsmouth, Ohio, where my great grandfather was. He went legit after he had made money through moonshine. Plus, he already came with money, and he had lots of wealth. And he started working for the railroad, the railroad in Portsmouth, Ohio. Yes, he married this woman here. They passed their wealth down to. She died before he lived. They passed the wealth down to my grandma. She spent the money. She went to Mexico and traveled because he would travel back and forth to Mexico. She, I heard, got a young boyfriend, bought a bunch of jewelry, spent a bunch of money. But see, she was an orphan originally. So she wasn't taught about wealth preservation. She ran through it. And then my great grandfather that had bequeathed the silver and the precious metals to my brother and me gave it to my mom. But there were no stipulations. There was no will, no, except for I bequeathed this to my great grandchildren. No instructions, no trust. So she spent it in order to live, and she gave it to her religious institution that said, "Hey, you guys, we're teaching you about how to eat to live. We're teaching you about certain ways to be righteous in the eyes of the God of that particular organization. So give us what you have." And she said, "Kia," she told me as an adult, "all I had was the silver and the precious metals. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was just some coin. So I gave it to my religious organization." She told me this because I had an awakening almost a decade ago, 10 years ago, about precious metals. And then I recalled my great grandfather giving me precious metals at 6. And I remember the velvet bags. I remember taking it out. I remember how it felt in my hands. I remember putting it on my face. I remember smelling it. I remember all these genetic memories started flooding back to me. And I started researching my great grandfather. My son hired people. We rejected the stories of slavery. We rejected that you came from Africa. My great grandfather came from Colombia. And when you look at many documentations, it will say that the indigenous Colombians are copper colored or dark complected people. Even in the articles from which I read just a few minutes ago, there are places where it says that. And I want you to research where you come from and be proud about it. Whether you come from a European nation, an Asiatic nation, an indigenous nation, wherever you come from, you should be proud of it. Nobody should make you feel guilty for who your family is. That's asinine. And why? Why should you feel guilty for something that was a lie? Why should you feel victimized for something that was a lie? There are other articles on the Colombian president that I would like for you to read at your leisure. All I'm saying, family, is it's time for us to wake up to the truth. And it's time for us to share the truth with our family members and let them know from whence they came and who they are. Show you another picture of my great grandfather, Manuel Gomez, from Bogota, Colombia. I'm very proud. This is his wife in her older age. Saw a picture of her when she was younger. One of my cousins, second cousin, looked just like her. But this is her from the Blackfoot tribe in the Americas, here in North America. And this is my great grandfather, Manuel Gomez. I can't remember my grandmother's name, my great grandma, because we called her Mimo. You know how people call you grandma, granny? We called her Mimo. Is her name Hawkshaw, Janie Hawkshaw. You hear the name Hawkshaw? That's an indigenous name. Hawkshaw. Janie Hawkshaw is her name. Manuel Domingo Gomez from Bogota, Colombia. And I heard that the Gomezes in Colombia actually ran the government. But other parts of his history I'll say because it's sacred. I know who he was. I know why he came to the Americas. And I'm grateful for what he taught me by bequeathing me precious metals. I'm glad that I didn't hold on to that slavery narrative. I looked at the documents. Neither side of my family came from Africa. Neither side of my family was enslaved. Neither side, my mama's side, my daddy's side is Cherokee. My mama's side is Blackfoot. And Colombian, I don't know what their indigenous tribe from Colombia is. Blackfoot, Cherokee, and Choctaw on my mama's side, and Colombian. My daddy's side, my great grandmother was full-blooded Cherokee on my daddy's side. So thank you for listening, family. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much, I Carrie, who sent a donation. God bless you. I Carrie says the devil is a liar. God gave us chosen ones dominion over the works of his hands. I'm taking back what belongs to me. That's right. Let's feel empowered. Let's take back what belongs to us, family. Thank you so much for that blessing. Thank you also for those of you who sent me a cash app, and I need to hurry up. My grandchildren are here. My daughter's waiting in the car to talk to me. Thank you so much for those of you who sent me a cash app. Thank you, Nakala, for your gift. And my cash app is $ Mama Kia 13, $ MAMAKIA 13, MAMAKIA 13. Thank you, Tony Withers, for the blessing that you've given me. Thank you so much for the donation. Thank you, Sister Dina, for the donation. Thank you, Chief Mac. You always take good care of me. I appreciate you for blessing me several times this week. As you said, you were going to make sure while I was traveled, I had all the food I needed. And while I was researching, I can focus on my research. Thank you, Chief Mac, for your blessing. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Michael Benison, Jacob Walker. Thank you, Taylor. And Eric, thank you so much. Sister Colleen Noventry, thank you. Thank you, Albert. And thank you, Sister Felicia. Thank you, Shara, for sending me a cash app blessing. Thank you, Sister Shayla, as well, for your financial blessing. Thank you, Aunt Gret. Thank you, family. I appreciate you. I am always honored for anything that you do to contribute to the family here, the Soul Tribe family, whether you send a financial donation or you show up. Thank you. 1 minute, please. So thank you for joining us, family. I appreciate you. I love you so much. If you give me a moment, I need to take this phone call. Sorry about that. I was speaking, but you all couldn't hear me. My great grandmother's name was Janie Hawkshaw. Don't ever give the enemy your power. Know thyself. Somebody just said it. The first law, the first commandment, Apollo says, is know thyself. Don't ever give the enemy your power, family. Marlon says, I am Caribbean and proud of it. Original North America or North American. Be proud of where you come from. Don't let anybody, any school system, any government make you feel guilty for who you are or from whence you've come. Read the book of Enoch. Who is that? Quara says. Our ancestors helped the Slavic people from being enslaved, but they didn't teach that. Thank you, Marlon Jeffries. We helped the Slavic people from being enslaved. Yes, because the Slavics that came here were, they say the first slaves, but Marlon is teaching us that the ancestors here in North America helped them. So and who were they enslaved by? The Moors, so they say, from Europe. Why do you think Christopher Columbus came in 1492? That's the year the Moors were kicked out of Spain. The Moors were kicked out of Europe. They say they ruled Spain and Europe from 711 to 1492, but I say it was probably longer than that, probably from way before 711, because the original Europeans were dark complected people, dark complected beings. The original beings all over the planet were dark complected. So that means the original Europeans were. We can look that up. They called them gypsies, the Italians. The mother line they called gypsies. I didn't know that. Thank you, Pat Paul. Bottom line, I just want to fix this mess that they made. Bring back the matriarch. At this point, Mike said, absolutely. Absolutely. I've been awakened from my birth, Copper Aborigine says. My parents taught me who we are, that we're the descendants of the original people. That's facts. You're welcome. You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Murray said, you're welcome. Joe says he only standing with his people. Christ will unite us. Yes. And when your crown chakra activate, that's the Christos consciousness ascending to fifth dimension and higher. They would have no chance if all indigenous peoples united as one nation. No chance. Yes, all those that enslaved us wouldn't have a chance to enslave anybody if everybody stood together. Yes, the indigenous people here are prisoners of war, but yet everybody wants to benefit from the indigenous people here. They want to be like the indigenous people. They want to walk like them, talk like them, have swagger like them, make money off of them, sell hair to the women, do the nails of the women, put their markets in our community, their gas stations, their convenience stores, their hotels, their everything, their restaurants. Oh, they're all taught to, yes, they can put them everywhere, but they really target the indigenous people community, so-called classified as Black, because we got the most wealth in the world. We just don't know it. Even if you look at our spending habits, you can see how wealthy so-called Black people are. It's just that our money doesn't circulate in our own communities because we don't have a community. We let Michael Luther King, whose name really isn't Martin or King, lie to us and tell us we needed to integrate it with people who didn't want nothing to do with us. Plus, it makes no sense to infiltrate people in their stores and their communities that didn't want nothing to do with you. When you look at the original treaties, they were allowed to have colonies and they did their own business. That's why Barack Obama and President Trump said the same thing. Morocco were the first people to acknowledge us as our own nation. The Europeans that came here had their own nation, their own way of doing things. Why would you then leave your land, your stores, your schools, your wealth, your banks, and go and then bum rush the Europeans who didn't want you there? That wasn't the original agreement. But Martin Luther King told you have civil rights instead of human rights. Told you need to be civilized and have civil rights. You need to have privileges and not rights. So you should go and infiltrate somebody else's community and infiltrate their way of doing business and their educational systems, and then leave your land and your school systems and leave your teachers high and dry. And now your doctors don't have jobs in their hospitals, and now the hospitals are vacant, and all these dynasties and all these big buildings and government buildings are empty because you ran following behind Michael Luther King and the so-called Black Panthers and the so-called Black nationalists and the Pan-Africanists who told you to either infiltrate the Europeans and their way of doing things or go back to Africa. They lied. I see the Duke of Tears often refer people to watch the movie Gangs of New York. Yes, he does. He's been on our show many times. You can go to the Dr. Kia Pruitt show. Look, just a couple of days ago, we featured another one of the interviews I did with him. I see the Duke of Tears is somebody you want to follow. Look him up on YouTube. He, as well as Dr. G and Taj Tariq Bey. What's the name of their channel? I see the Duke of Tears have been on many times. Let's watch the movie that he told us to watch, Gangs of New York. Let me show you his channel. His wife will be on sometime next week to talk about their organic natural products for hair, skin, and nails. Selena Cordoba Ali is his wife. Beautiful, beautiful lady from Panama. Spanish, fluent Spanish and English speaker. This is Asir's channel. He talks about indigenous peoples and things that relates to the Americas period. He is a historian. He has a doctorate in jurisprudence. He is a grand sheik, a researcher, a scholar, a philosopher, a musician, a publisher, an author, and he has a comic book out. So follow him. Also, please follow the Grand Sheik of the Moors and Dr. G, who goes into Moorish history, American history as it relates to all American people here. What's the House of Reawakening Minds, or Original House of Reawakening Minds? Is that channel? They were some of the first, they were the first people I heard of to talk about a motu proprio, which is that letter that Pope Francis wrote to Obama and the United States corporation saying it's over for us. We got to stand down, cease and desist, or the Grand Army of the Republic will take us down, with General Ham at the forefront leading the Grand Army of the Republic. That Grand Army of the Republic is what you and I call the white hats of the military. Follow the original house of the official House of Reawakening Minds for more on the restored republic and constitutional law. If you want information on Intel, a lot of people that follow my channel follow the original Mark Z for intel on foreign currencies. Let me see if I can find his channel. He's called me several times, like if my channel was taken down or he heard I was sick, the original Mark Z has called me to check on me. So I honor him. I respect him. He gives great intel. You want to follow him. If you want to know about investing in foreign currencies, please give him a like on his channel, subscribe to his channel, watch his video. Maria Nicole is another person who many of you follow. Maria Nicole is a personal friend of Chief Max. I've come to know her and I did a show with her as well. And there are others. I'm just giving you a few in case you're interested in doing what the Bible says. A wise man leaves an inheritance for his children's children, and the wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous. Don't just wait for Executive Order 138.13 or 138.18 or 138.48, where President Trump said he will confiscate the wealth of those who committed crimes against humanity and give it back to the people. Don't just wait for these dividends that are coming from all of the tariffs that President Trump has got from these other countries, or from the trade agreements. We're all going to be paid out, or from the NSARA benefits. Yes, we're all going to get that, and you're going to have access to your trust, but also accumulate wealth. There are some foreign currencies, also known as foreign reserve notes, that you can get for a few dollars. They'll put it in the chat which ones you should get and where you should go, or you can look at my show. This is Maria Nicole, who talks about foreign currencies on her YouTube channel. I put her link in the chat. If you want to follow somebody on Twitter to get geopolitical news, I'm just dropping gems, okay? Because I got a private group that I'll talk about only wealth with. But I'm going to give you some people to follow if you want to follow some people as it relates to the financial market and geopolitical news. You can follow Ariel on Twitter. He also has a Patreon account. This brother got about 500,000 followers or more. This is Ariel. Great intel on Iraq and other geopolitical news. Almost 500,000 followers. Follow him on Twitter. We're about to wrap it up. You can buy depreciated assets like land, silver, gold, copper, or foreign currencies with a few dollars or with a lot of dollars if you have a lot of dollars to spend. And then the final person I would encourage you to follow for news like this, not like necessarily about where your origins are from, but geopolitical news, global financial news. You might want to consider following Majid. He's from Saudi Arabia, if my memory serves me correctly. Follow Majid. It's in the chat. Here he is, Majid. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me, family. Rich always tells me to remind you all to please get silver and gold, because silver is over $61. I'm trying to get rid of this right now. Silver is over $61 right now. I don't know how to remove this thing. Maybe if I put a comment up. Silver is over $61 right now. When I first started talking about silver in 2017, it was $14 per ounce. Thank you, Qurah, Qurah. His name is Ryan, like yours. Buy the Iraqi dinar as soon as possible. Thank you. $2.99 copper you can get, family. So Rich P. Rich always tells me to remind everybody to get precious metals as soon as you can. You can contact our affiliate, and he says, go to Miles Franklin. That's my affiliate. He's trusted Miles Franklin. He appreciates and respects his work. He gives the financial forecast as it relates to precious metals. You can contact Miles Franklin Precious Metals Company, and their CEO is Andy Scheckman at 952-929-7006, or send an email to info@milesfranklin.com. Let them know how much money you want to spend. You can ask them what you should recommend, what they recommend you get, or you can tell them you want, which precious metals. You can get a 401k, a gold 401k, some of which actually comes in physical precious metals. They also have a storage unit, been in business almost 40 years with an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. 952-929-7006, or send an email to info@milesfranklin.com. Let them know Dr. Kia Pruitt referred you, and you will get the best prices in the entire industry. Let's see, any more remarks? Mark Z is a good person. Thank you. I appreciate him. And he checks on me, and he will literally call me, not just send me a message. He will call me. How are you? Are you okay? What's going on? I just wanted to check on you. I appreciate that. Yes, you guys are saying your great grandfather was 100% Cherokee, your great grandmother full blood Cherokee. And people can present as European or Caucasian, but they can be Cherokee. They can be indigenous, because we all made love. You know what? When you make love to each other, you end racism. You feel me? All right, family, that's about it. The grandbabies want to say goodbye.
Bye.
Amen Ra and Cherish Mia Moore wants to say goodbye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So, family, I hope you enjoyed the show. I don't personally help with genealogy. My son hired somebody. I could bring somebody on. All right, y'all go back over there to help us with that. That, somebody that knows how to help everybody find this genealogy would be wonderful. Okay, I will definitely find somebody who can come on the show and help us figure out where we come from, because a lot of these DNA tests can't be trusted. So that's it, family. I'm looking at some of your comments. We Indigenous Americans are light beings. We are older than planet Earth, which is our mother, Chi. Oh, thank you, Apollo. Once you know who you are, you can't unknow. Houston, Texas is in the house from the Republic of Houston. We were never slaves. We're proud. We fought for freedom. Absolutely. Wonderful history. All right. I'm just looking at some of your comments before we go. I spoke from my soul today. It's time we know the truth. A lot of these DNA tests were erroneous. I showed you the article. Let me see if I can find it again. Well, I showed you the banned DNA study that exposes the shocking truth of the origin of Black Americans, that so-called Black Americans came from here, from the Americas. I told you that the Colombian president said the same thing. And now let me see if I can show you that study again. There was a study that exposed critical security flaws in widely used DNA sequencing technology. Portable genetic sequencers used around the world to sequence DNA have critical, previously unreported security vulnerabilities that could reveal or alter genetic information without detection, according to a new study. Vulnerabilities, flaws in DNA testing around the world, around the entire world. They had flaws. They may have lied to you. And this is why you need to ask your own elders from whence you came. Here's the article. How long have we been on? Oh my gosh, we've been on for 1 hour and 49 minutes. So that's it, family. I don't want to bore you with this information. I love you so much. I appreciate you. I'm very grateful for all of you that showed up here and shared in the conversation and shared information about your ancestry. It's time for us to learn the truth about where we come from. Yes, we're all one. Yes, we all come from source. Yes, that is the truth. It's still a good idea to know your ancestry, because people who don't know their origins are like a tree without roots. There was an ancient or historical philosopher that said that. Some of you know who said that. People who don't know their origins are like a tree without roots. It's hard to be nurtured. It's hard to have self-esteem and confidence, feel good about yourself. Instead, I'm reading a book called The Jewish Phenomenon, about the Jews that are here, the people that classify themselves as Jews that are here. They say themselves that they feel confident because they have money, they have foundations, they help each other, they circulate the money and the currency and the money in their own community first before they send it out. When any immigrants that call themselves Jews that come from their specific bloodline, I don't know if it's Germanic Jews or where they come from, Israel, whatever, but they say when they come here, they give them money from their foundation. They give hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars per year to people that classify themselves as Jews from Israel and other places, Germany and other places. They give them money from their foundation. But they said the number one way that we maintain control and power, and the way we're able to own and control media, music, a lot of they tell you about all these companies and business and platforms that own, is because we know who we are. We know we're from a Jewish bloodline. I don't even know what that means, but we tell everybody we're from Israel, and we go to our Mecca, which is Israel, once a year. We teach our kids you're Jewish and that you're God's chosen people, and we feel self-esteem. And we know that we are the selected. These are what the people, it's in their book, The Jewish Phenomenon. One day I'm going to read it directly from the book. Say, read The Jewish Phenomenon, the first chapter. And because we know who we are, even though it's a lie, according to what a lot of people say you're not really the real Jews. Even though we know that the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, that faction of Britain and that European in Europe gave you that land in the Palestinian regency, area. We know that the Rothschild faction of a certain bloodline gave you that area called Israel, and you were able to enslave the Palestinians and steal their resources there and call yourself Jews. Now you say it's your land and you fight over it, and you tell your children that they all originated from there. But some people say you really didn't come from there. Some people say you came from Germany, you came from other places, you came from Russia. I don't know. But they tell them a story and they believe it and they indoctrinate them. And they say in their book, that's how we maintain our control. And they say in that book, we used to have a good relationship with Black people and we support the liberal agenda. They said we used to have a good, but they said some Muslims caused a faction between the Jews and the Blacks, and now we're not as friendly as we are to one another. This is what the Jewish Phenomenon book say. But it says that we support pro-choice. We support feminism, Margaret Sanger. We support all these things that are liberal that really hurt the so-called Black community. But they said, we support the Democratic Party. We support the liberal agenda. We love Black people. But do you really? Because your ideology is conservative. The way you handle your money is conservative. The fact that you own and control these businesses and you have them in trust is conservative. But you identify as a liberal and you funnel money to the liberal agenda and to the so-called Black community. But why do you really do that? Do you really care about Black people? Because Margaret Sanger didn't really like Black people. And neither did any of these people that were against Black babies being born or Indigenous babies being born. And maybe that's why there's so many abortion clinics in the so-called Black community. But they tell you right in their book, we tell our people who we come from, and they love it, and they have self-esteem, and they have business, and they have foundations, and we give it to our people and our people only, and we circulate the money in our community, but we funnel and we support the liberal agenda. That's what they said in the Jewish Phenomenal book. Read it for yourself. Who was Margaret Sanger? Because they sure did say they support Margaret Sanger. I forgot about it. She believed in genocide, I believe. Was she the one that supported abortion? American birth control activist, yes. Her and who's that woman over women's suffrage? They say to support her too. Who is her? Who is she? Margaret Sanger, and there was another one. Was it Gloria Steinem? They just straight out tell you. American activists and journalists, they will pretend like they care by supporting the liberal agenda, but the liberal agenda is not for the unification, edification, uplifting, and education, true education, and health and posterity and prosperity of the indigenous peoples. This years ago says they harvest us from our energy, everything, even our culture. We are the children of source. So I just wanted to bring you our Truth is Earthquake. This information, we all should be proud about who we are and from whence we came. Planned Parenthood, yes, yes. Jewish Phenomena say we support that and we finance it. So that's it, family. It's important for you to know your heritage, for who you are. It's important for you to accumulate wealth so you can pass it down to your posterity. My name is Dr. Kia Pruitt. I'm so grateful that you have joined me today. I trust that you learned something, or at least you gleaned something that is helpful, that will help you on your search. No matter where you come from, I hope you will look it up and you will hold true to that, and you will honor your ancestors by being grateful for who they are and what they taught you. If you're interested in joining our private membership group, I put that link in the chat where we talk about wealth and investments. On this Saturday, we'll talk about a particular sleeper investment that you might want to consider. Thank you, new members. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Again, I'm Dr. Kia Pruitt. Thank you for the financial contribution to the Cash App. Thank you for your time, your energy, your comments, your questions. I'm Dr. Kia Pruitt. I hope I said something to raise your vibrations and inspire you to create the most amazing, magnificent life that you desire and deserve. Go out and make this a good day, family. Happy Hump Day. Bye-bye.
Shining wisdom's light, teaching soul tribe how to see through the night. Ancient scriptures and bloodlines she knows, spreading truth wherever she goes. Soul tribe. channel, knowledge flows, breaking chains that hold us close, teaching paths to abundance and wealth, guiding others to free themselves. Soul tribe rising, hear her call, raising vibrations